Hey everybody, welcome to Mountain Deer. This is a clip from a seminar that we just barely did at Huntstock telling the story of the castle buck. Nearly everybody has that one buck that taught them a lot of lessons, whether you got them or not. This is one that I didn't get, but he taught me so much about deer tracking, and it was the first long distance multiple jump deer tracking job that I ever did, and it involved two different bucks. But the main older deer that is in the story is really an interesting one, and I learned so many lessons for him. I hope you enjoy this. Our subject today, we were trying to paw over what we ought to talk about and what might be interesting, and also too what I would want to hear about. And actually I want something or somebody to help me with my difficulties, right? And one of those hard times that is really tough is once you've jumped that buck, staying on the job mentally, staying on the job physically, and being able to do something about it is tough. Hopefully we can give you some takeaways that'll help you when the time comes and you get out in the field and things get to happening. I have been paying attention to deer for a long time. And being a taxidermist to boot, like deer is every day, all the time. I don't hardly get away from it. So in all of that studying and all that listening and all that paying attention, I've picked up quite a few things. The boys now have kind of started in with the tracking thing, and they've really gone crazy with it and gotten good at it. They too have had that telescoping effect of everyone's learning that they had everywhere. But one of those big moments when hunting gets tough is like you've jumped that buck and you've kicked him up, and now what? Or you walked into your stand and you jumped the deer and he took off, right? What do I do now? How can I assess it? And how everyone would react to jumping a deer, especially when they're tracking it, and what they would do next is going to be different. You ask that same question to any of the other fellas here, and some are very experienced people, and they're now coming to answer that question. They'll all give you different answers and what you should do next. And over the years, I've jumped a bazillion deer and scared them away. And you will do lots of it if you take up tracking for any amount. And most of the time, the information that you take in and what you have, you'll have to bring it up. And what I like to do is I go through a checklist to tell me if I had to wait a long time, if I should move on it, if I should call or if I should not call. You know, when you're right at the deer and he jumps off for some reason. Sometimes he was doing something and you just bumped into him. Sometimes, you know, there's a bazillion different scenarios that can happen under those circumstances. So we kind of want to work our way through some of those. And I have to say that in my deer hunting career, I met this one buck, and he probably taught me as much or more than most all of the information I had taken in about that beforehand. Larry Benoit's first book there, How to Kill the Biggest Buck of Your Life, and he talks about jumping that deer and all those things. I almost couldn't put that book down when I started reading that, and I want to say I was in my 30s probably when I read that, in my early 30s. I had been tracking way before that as a teenager, so like the tracking part of it wasn't so new, but to hear someone explain it in such a way that was so helpful and just easy so that you could take it right in was good. As I'm moving up to this deer that I'm expecting to see most any second, and it's a pretty decent track and it looks like a buck to me. I've followed quite a few, and the size and the way he walks and stuff, it looks to me like a buck. He hasn't laid down any sign. I come around the corner and he's literally probably here to the back of the tent from me, laying down on this little tiny hardwoods we'll have where the stump rolled over and there's those humps. He's laying just inside of one of those little divots in the hardwoods right there, and there's just a few small green Christmas trees around him. It's like a little island of some small fir trees in among those hardwoods, and that's the island effect. And I want to talk, we're going to get into that a little bit too, where deer will use the edges and stuff like that. Well, this little buck goes up, lays down. I've got my old I think it's a CVA Frontier that I had built out of a kit. I've got this old muzzle loader, and I'm looking for him any second, and he's up above me just some, and he's just hidden just a little bit there. But as I start up nice and easy coming around that corner thing, he jumps to his feet and takes off, and I don't get a shot. He kangaroos really hard, and he runs really really giving her some. And I was pretty certain that he hadn't, I was wearing snow camo and an orange hat, and I was pretty certain that all he saw pretty much was a hat, and I was pretty certain he hadn't smelt me either. And back then I didn't call to deer either when I jumped them. If I had called, he probably would have jumped out and heard a grunt and then boom, 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 stop and look, right? And that could have gained me a close second chance at him before he was completely gone. But that wasn't the case, and he just jumped off and went quite a ways. He went probably a couple hundred, almost 300 yards, came to a stop, looked back over his shoulder. I worked my way up through there, and again, I think he picked me out from a pretty good distance, and then away he went out around the mountain. So I follow him out around the mountain. We've gone probably half a mile. He's going in a steady skirt a third of the way around the mountain, steadily skirting it, and then all of a sudden does a 90 and goes straight uphill. He was headed this way and then just turns and goes right up. Then he turns back into the wind. He was kind of going into the wind and quartering it some and headed up the hill. Then all of a sudden he goes downwind some. Most of the time, if they're thinking about taking a break, they just soon take a break downwind of you. That way, if you pull up, your scent drifts down to them, and if you now have to turn and move towards them, they're up on it before it happens. So they're getting a chance to smell you plus see what's going on, right? You watch your dog, he'll do turns and things where he can smell things. He'll walk out into the yard and boom, 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 the nose will go, what was that? He got one little whiff and then he moves to where, because he's using the wind. That part of the scent world we don't have a clue about. Animals have it, and we just have to imagine what it's like to be able to smell the way they can smell. This buck does the 90, and I have it in my brain, oh, he's run downwind just a little bit here, we got to be careful. Now if I go downwind real slow, he's going to have plenty of time to smell me because my scent is drifting right down towards him. So I can't go too slow, and I know that, and I'm moving right along. He gets down a little bit, and then I want to say 100 yards, 150 yards tops, and then he turns another 90 after standing there for a little while, and he step, and he picks up his pace and he's headed up the hill. His gait has changed completely. Now he's a lot like the deer Taylor shot this year, just like a 2-year-old with a little small basket rack. He starts up the hill and then all of a sudden takes off as he's walking, then all of a sudden takes off and does a whole bunch more jumps up the hill. And I'm like, why did he all of a sudden just take off jumping and going again when he never even stopped to look back and he was already steadily holding a pace? I'm wondering that, right? I'm always wondering why the deer does what it does. Well, he was going up through there and he smelt something and geared up, and the wind's coming towards, and he's going up, quartering up the hill some more. So I'm like, what? There's something right up here. So I start looking up in that direction. As I follow his jump marks up through, I look and there's a deer standing there. And I said, oh, there he is right there. He must have done one of these. I put the gun up and I'm watching it and looking, and it stands up and it's a great big buck. That deer had smelt that other buck and went up towards him a little bit and then doing up the hill. So I'm looking and I'm like, I don't care, look at that thing. And he's standing up there with that rack, and I bring up the gun and I put it right on him. I'm shooting them giant iron sights, right? He's about 130 yards or so. I pull the trigger and I can see the snow hole just underneath right here. He had a tree right on his shoulder, and he's doing this with his head stuck out around, and I've got like this areas to shoot at. So I shoot at that and I'm a little low. It's quite a ways, and it goes right in underneath. He doesn't move. He goes like that and stands there. Now I've got an empty muzzle loader, so I'm like, oh great. So start filling that thing up, just about get the cap on there, just about ready to go, and off he goes. I just almost ready to get that second shot at him, and away he goes. Again, I didn't call. That would have been the time to call, and I didn't do that back then. Off he goes, but he's going easy, and he's kind of confused. He's not sure why that little buck came up through. He can see me, but I'm all in snow camo, and that just looks like a blur down there, but I don't know what that is. Most mature bucks are really good at avoiding anything different, anything that doesn't seem to be normal. I'm out. I'm definitely not going over there. Like, they definitely won't approach it. And I'm not sure, and off he goes. And he just jumps nice and easy up the hill. And I'm like, oh man. So anyway, don't give up. Larry says, don't give up, right? So I'm hearing his in the back of my mind, and I start up the hill and I go looking. He goes up through, jumps pretty good, gets up there a ways, and then all of a sudden does a little bit of a hook to the left, and there's an island of fur up there. Back to that island effect, right? Deer will tend to use cover and move through it on the edges and all these little islands. If you imagine yourself fishing, where do you throw your lure? Next to the lily pads, next to the stump, next to the tree, right? They're an island of habitat and change amongst the rest of what is, right? So I'm watching him use that, and he goes up, and I said, he's going to be standing up there watching me, and I'm in a wide open here, and I got to be careful. But that hump right there, that little green mess, and I can see his tracks up there about 100 yards, but I can't see much past that, and I can see almost 200 yards to this. And the wind's good, coming from right down the hill towards me. So I just nice and easy, and I line up straight with it so that I'm not as much sideways movement as possible, and I just go straight right to it as much as I can, using the terrain and the trees to cover me, and I work my way right up through, looking for the deer as much as I possibly can, right? Keep your chin up all the time. Don't get stuck looking down. You bump into the hair, right? So keep that chin up, and I'm going up through there, working my way up. And sure enough, he's done about a 90 or so around this small green hump that's maybe 100 yards across. I look at that and I say, well, the downwind side would be over here. I'll swing it this way. So I swing it just nice and easy. And I don't like to leave the track. I am a firm believer in not leaving the track. I don't like to do that unless something like this scenario where there's this one little island and he's hooked the island, and there's a good chance he's in it or on the side, and if I go this way, he's definitely going to see me, he's definitely going to win me. I got to leave it. So I leave it just for a little bit and hook my way up, use all the cover I can to get up in there a little bit, and as I start coming over and around corners, you're always being careful. I get up there and I'm looking for him, and he's behind a couple of trees, and blows at me, and boom, don't get, and off he goes again. Again, didn't call, away he goes. Up the hill, I can't get a shot, nothing I can do about it, kind of bummed. I'm trying to keep my spirits up, which is another thing you got to do when you jump a deer. You got to think it isn't over yet, it isn't over yet. He's not running real hard. Bigger, more like 3 or 4 plus year old deer, all they want to do is maintain that distance. I just need to stay away enough from you. They'll blast off, go for a short way, stop and check and see if you're a high-speed pursuer like a coyote, right? They learn to boom and stop and check and see if it's something real fast. And if it isn't anything real fast and they're in some thicker cover where they're feeling good and they can stop for a second, many, especially like legend bucks that are 7 to 10 years old, they'll blast off, go through, get into some thick cover and hit the brakes. Now, whether or not they focus on looking back or they just stop and stand and look over their back shoulder, they'll make sure there isn't a high-speed pursuit. There isn't something coming real fast and I have to make a quick decision change about movement. They'll stop, check, listen, take in their surroundings. Anything else here? Nope. Okay, go. Right? Just like a veteran soldier would do. It's the same kind of thing. They pull up, I've done this a billion times, check, everything's cool, okay, here we go. And then not let up and keep trucking. This is like a 3-year-old, maybe a 4-year-old at the most from what I've seen. It looks like about 160 to 180 pounds. And I couldn't see any brow tines, but there's definitely 3 on top, and it's probably about that big. I get up through to where he made the hook, and now that I've jumped him the 3rd time, and he's moved on, and I got to give him some time. I don't eat generally when I'm hunting, so I'm not going to take the time to just stop everything. And I need to learn more about this buck, and I've got a few minutes to kill. I've got to let him go someplace where he feels good, he calms down a little bit. You will not run down a deer. They got 4 legs. Them hams are this big around. You don't do that. But I also know I need to learn more about him. I go back and see the hook he made, and I get a little bit more of what he did and why he did when he was looking back at me. I want to and I've just got a few minutes. Let's just go take a good look at it, see the stride. We've been on side hill for a long time, and this was one little flat spot. I love to assess a deer when he's on a flat spot. So I come around, I'm assessing how, when he's walking kind of normal, I want to see the length of his stride. I can tell better the weight of him and the age to him just a little bit better. I can get a little better feel for that deer. And he does do the hook, comes right back, stops, then he pulls up and has another better view, and then he sees me from that and off he goes. So I just learned how he does it, and he hooks to the right. I follow him up the hill, and he does the same thing. Another island of small spruces way up high. We're not quite to the peak of the mountain. There's a small incidental saddle at the let off in the mountain. I like to look and think about the whole mountain. I think of the big picture all the time, and I'm looking up there trying to pre-predict where I think the deer will go. He hooks up through. I see a little bit of greenery, a whole bunch of boulders and rocks. Good chance he's at the top or the side, and there's another little spot over here too. He might be in between the two of them. So I'm watching that. I'm picking my route, and it's a beautiful view here, and there's a bunch of crap woods right there, and it's fairly steep, and he's going to have a good view looking down at me, and he's got the high ground. You got to give him the high ground. So I move over into this stuff and pull up the hill 150 yards, then come out straight and go straight at him. When you're moving straight at a deer, you'll have a better chance of them holding longer than you will if you're sideways. Deer know the difference between person and deer, right? That long body is, I look like a deer coming straight at you. There's something, and it's skinny and straight and it's coming right at you. That's what a deer is like when it comes right at you. It's that same kind of shape, but as soon as a deer sees a deer sideways, they know it's a deer. And if it's a person, the stick going sideways, oh, I ain't. The other thing too is to keep and not be too intense about your approach and too vibes. You know how a dog picks up on your vibes? Somebody walks down the street and your dog goes, yeah, right? Animals pick up on your vibes too, and you want to stay just as calm, cool, and collected and nice and easy and not be intense. I walk across that nice and easy. I start up through there, and I'm not seeing anything, and I go up on the upper side of the rocks and I pull right in, and sure enough, there's his track, and he's turned off and run, and he's done another right hand hook. Seems to always hook to the right, and I'm on jump number 4 now. Now, the other advantage that you'll often have is whether or not you know the land, you know the terrain and how it's all built because you're familiar with it. When you go to your old hunting spots and you're really familiar with that terrain, you can better plan where you will go and where the deer will go, and you can go a little faster because it's land you know. That is one of the speed indicators is knowing the landscape and knowing where to walk. That makes a huge difference. I know the land pretty well, and I know he's going to want to either go down over this side of the mountain on the north or go on the west side. There's still about 150, 200 feet of peak left. He isn't quite to the very top. We're at probably 2,900 feet now. The trees are getting smaller. There's a lot greener. There is an open area with a lot of rock on the top of the mountain too, so there's an open area. He takes off along the side of it using the edge, then breaks out into the open, and I see where he's gone up through, and I see this opening, and I'm saying he's going to stand up there and watch for me now and see if I'm coming, because he's only going about 600 or 700 yards and then he stops and waits. He's done that 4 times now, right? You've got to pick up on the pattern that's happening in front of you, and if you don't, you've got to go with your experience. And this deer, from what I've learned from him so far, this is the way he behaves. So there's the hook. He would be standing in here someplace. I have a little crown here. I'm going to swing right over and hook right up through here. And when I do that, I get up to that side of that opening. There he is again. He's always on the right side of that looking. We're really close, and I almost got a shot at him right then. This time we're really close. He's not expecting it. I've really taken my time. You have to have them go into a more calmer state, and when their state is wound up and you keep hitting them, they're going to react. Their behavior and their psychology towards you is going to react. When a buck knows you're coming for him, he's a whole new animal. Little ones will blast off and just go cross country like a doe. Their programming goes back to mom. I don't know how many of you ever track does real hard. You ever follow a doe real hard? My God, they'll come unleashed and just go right ridge, and then way over here a mile away, and they're watching to see if you're coming, right? They're that crazy. Now, they have to be that way because they have others to look out for. They have to warn their mothers, right? Mothers warn the rest of the bunch. We have to look out for everybody. I want to advertise, there's a problem over here. Woo, woo. Those does blowing all the time. That's a normal thing for them. His young bucks, their programming will run back to mama, and they will act like mom acts and blast off and do what has always worked for them in the past. Every buck, every trick he ever pulled off, it never failed before. He became smarter when it almost didn't get pulled off. You call a buck in and you bust him, is he going to come running into the next grunt that sounds exactly like you? You know, you're going to learn from that, right? So the learning curve between the 1.5, the 2.5, the 3, the 5, the legend deer, right? The learning curve with all those bucks and how they react and what their demeanor is before and during is very important. You'll find a lot of times that that buck will react to your reactions after a while. An older buck will just keep that space. Young bucks will say, I'm out of here, right? So when you track one, you want to go after the bigger, older one. He doesn't run so hard. You get a chance of catching him sometimes. And them little ones, boy, they really go. They turn it right on. He does the hook, and I almost catch him in that elbow. Down over the hill he goes. I know it's a traditional stand spot down below me in this saddle, and he's coming down into this saddle, and I'm saying to myself, there's a little old man who always sits down there. That deer's probably going to die because he's headed for that saddle. He goes right down in through there, does a little bit of an elbow, and smells them. He runs right past them, right in front of them, and the little old man has his grandson with him. That buck busts out of and just deliberately comes right across in front of them and gone. They stand up. They were eating their sandwich. They stood up and went, oh my God. And the boy couldn't quite get a shot. It's not a minute later, boom, I come right out of the woods right there. And the guy says, wow, are you after that buck? And I said, yep. And he says, that thing is going. Man, was he going fast. But it's a big one. I said, oh yeah. He says, how long you been tracking it? I said, well, I'm parked way over on that road over there. He's like, seriously? That's like 6-7 miles from here. I said, oh, we've come a long ways. He's gone quite a ways. And he said, well, good luck. Boy, thanks for giving us a chance, Adam, right? You put him right through my saddle, right? I said, well, where he's headed, he doesn't have a great lot of space, and he may be back. So keep an eye out. And he's like, okay, yep, see you later. So I started in on the buck again. The buck deliberately tried to pawn me off on them. Older deer, especially legend deer, will do that quite a bit. They'll bring you up the side of something just as a normal travel pattern kind of thing, and then all of a sudden they'll smell a moose or something and turn and go right up to the moose, walk by the moose, and then continue da-dunk, 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 and try and peel that off, or continue a short ways and watch a moose. Now I have a warning system set up right there. Now I'm just going to watch that. Many legend bucks, the older bucks, the 5 to 10-year-olds, they do that all the time. Let's put something, does. Run to a group of does. Come in, saunter through, don't wind them up, go past them a little ways and stand there. Sure enough, he does all of a sudden, he's going this way and it's quartering downwind. He turns and goes right upwind. I said, oh, there's something down here. All of a sudden, he did a 90. Whenever you're a deer you're tracking, especially if he's moving fairly fast or he's going slow and he does a stop and deliberately steps 90 degrees, he makes that drastic turn. For what seems like no reason, there's a reason. And most of the time, it's the nose. He smelt those does, brought me right down to those does, walked right through the batch, went out there another 60 yards or so on the other side of the thicker cover and just stood there. I come down the hill, deer. Ooh, check, 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 check. 5 of them. No horns. Where is that bugger? And I know I'm being set up, right? When you know you're being set up, and it's like, I know it's a trap, but I got to do it. And I went in there nice and easy, and the does dink, to dink, to dink, to dink, and he right over here. Sure enough, and when I get to where he stopped, look back, watch them, I'm like, you bugger. We start up the hill a ways, and he does the same thing, does another 90, heads downwind quite a distance, goes out across. Now he's running out of that space I was talking about. He's running out of that space and there's no more cover. It's huge hardwoods for a long ways. But the wind is coming out of the thicker woods, and as he's crosswinding that thicker woods, he does another 90 back up in that thick stuff, and he climbs right up about 150 yards past a beaver pond. He came down, went around the beaver pond. Just before he cleared the beaver pond, he jumps up on a rock. There was a rock about probably as big as this table and about that long. That deer hopped up on top of that just like him getting on this table. I've never seen that ever in my whole deer hunting career. I've never seen a buck jump up on a rock just like for a view, and this buck actually did that. And I knew to myself right then, this thing's a legend. He's been around, he might be quite a bit older than I think he is, and he's been tracked a bazillion times, and he had a great view. When I came down across the beaver dam over there, he could see me. He jumps off the rock, goes a little ways, and turns and goes up into that cover I'm talking about. I see that another 90-degree elbow, and I'm like, you bugger. And I wish I had a video camera at the time for the tracks on top of the rock. And since I've never seen that again. He goes up, does a little bit of a hook in that brush. I get up there with him, but I'm not very far into these softwoods, just a short ways, 20 yards or so, and he does a 90 and kitty corners a little bit, and I'm thinking, well, he always does right-hand hooks for some reason, but it's really steep, he shouldn't here. And he turns and goes straight down the hill, and I'm like, oh man, he must be down the side of it, and when I crossed, he's catching me down that edge again. Always watch your edges, that island, that border of change in woods. Always watch that. That's where the deer hang out. I get to that, I'm almost to it. I can see this huge 250, 300 yards hardwoods, this giant side hill right there. I can see the brook in the bottom, hardly any trees in the brook. I'm walking down through that brush and I'm looking up on the high side and I'm expecting to look down the edge and see him there, but I'm watching that high side. I'm real slow and easy. It's the end of the day. Next to the last day of muzzleloader season, I'm going real slow and easy, and I said, boy, I don't want to blow this. This is kind of my last chance. It's 4:30. I'm going nice and easy. I look in front of me and there's deer hair right there. And I said, oh, here we go. And I get the gun and I lean down and I look at it a little bit, and it's got horns, and I can just see a horn a little bit in the brush, and it's wiggling. And the ear is wiggling like this. And I lean out a little bit more, and it's a little small 4-pointer, about that big, and he's chewing his cud. And he's facing away from me. That buck had brought me up to that buck to try and peel me off. He had smelt that and said, ooh, here. He skirts down, goes along the edge, and I'm looking at the little buck, and I look back up on the hill for the big one, and I can't see anything. And then in between the trees, way up there, doom, da-doom, da-doom, and I'm like, oh, right? He got the finger, and I'm like, oh, and this little fella, he doesn't know what's up, and I'm like, oh man, and you got to take what you got. And I haven't shot a deer this year, and he's going home, and I'm like, right? And boom, and I bring him home. It goes right in the back of his neck, and I shoot him, and this one's now dead. And I scream at that one, and he's long gone. But that buck, it will always be a legend in my mind for what he taught me and for the good that he did. A lot of times, I want to try and develop a checklist of what I should do next. And of course, I'm asking myself, when he left, what was his attitude? Some deer will leave you and they'll just be confused. Some will know it's you. They're serious about it. Boom. How you react to those two things are different. If they're running off with their tail up or half, right? If he's just kind of loping off easy, he's just doing the kangaroo thing, kind of easy. A lot of times, I'll just leave him alone a little bit. He probably won't go that far, and that second meeting of him and me won't be that far away. So there's no need to hurry. If you hit him real hard, that's going to be different. Yep. Now see how he kind of moves off, but he's not real super concerned. Typical road deer, right? He's like, cars don't normally chase me, but I'm going to tell you I'm leaving. Like, you want to read the message that deer is leaving you as he leaves, and where he went and how he did it. Real important.